Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere quiet. A home you don't recognize, but one that somehow still feels familiar. The hallway smells like dust and lemon polish. There's a clock ticking in the other room, too slow, like it's tired of keeping time. And upstairs, well, there's a door no one's opened in years. This story unravels slowly, like memory. But fair warning, once you know what's been hidden in this house, you might wish you didn't. You probably wouldn't last a weekend here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're watching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Julia hadn't meant to open the old album. It was supposed to be a quick visit. Stop by her grandmother's house while the realtor took photos, make sure the curtains were tied back, the lights on, the rooms not too hollow. But something about the way the place smelled when she stepped inside, the warmth of aging paper and lemon polish, the faint trace of her grandmother's lavender talc, made her linger. The photo albums were stacked neatly in the living room cabinet, untouched for years. She sat cross-legged on the floor, fingers brushing dust from the leather spines. The red one was her favorite as a child, bright with gold corners and black pages. Her grandfather's handwriting, small and slanted, captioned each photo. She turned pages slowly. First, black and white portraits of her grandparents in their 20s. Then, color, birthdays, picnics, Christmas mornings. Her mother's face as a child, her uncle at 12. Julia herself as a baby, wearing a bonnet that never seemed to fit. Then, the photo came. Page 27. It didn't belong. There was no caption, no date, just a picture of a baby. Not Julia, not her mother. A child lying in the bassinet that had once been in the upstairs guest room. Pale blanket, button nose, big dark eyes looking just past the camera. The baby was smiling. Julia tilted her head. She'd memorized these albums when she was younger, used to flip through them like bedtime stories. That picture had never been there. She turned the page. More familiar images. A birthday cake she remembered, a Halloween photo of her mother dressed as a witch. But nothing else of the baby. No name, no context. She turned back. Still there. She took a photo of it with her phone, then carefully slipped the image from its sleeve. On the back, in pencil, was a single word in her grandmother's hand: Mary Beth. Julia blinked. She had never heard that name in her family, not once. She checked the family tree sketch hanging in the hallway. It stopped with her mother and uncle. No cousins, no siblings, no Mary Beth. Later that night, Julia asked her mother over the phone, trying to sound casual. "Do you remember a baby named Mary Beth?" There was a pause. "Where did you hear that name?" "It was in one of the photo albums, the red one." More silence. "That name shouldn't be in there." "Why?" Her mother's voice was quieter now. "Because that baby was never born." "But there's a photo." She was a dream your grandmother had. That's all. Julia knew her mother was lying. That night she couldn't sleep. The image of the baby lingered behind her eyes, not just because the photo was strange, but because it felt familiar, like something she should have known, or someone she had met once, long ago and forgotten. And upstairs, in the guest room, the bassinet was still there, folded up, waiting. The attic stairs groaned beneath Julia's weight, their familiar rhythm echoing just a bit too loud in the quiet house. She hadn't been up there in years, not since childhood, when the attic was a forbidden place filled with sharp corners and mothballed linens. Now, as she pulled the folding door open and climbed into the dry, dust-heavy space, it felt less like trespassing and more like remembering something that had always been hers to find. The light bulb above flickered to life with a weak pull of its chain. Shadows stretched across old trunks and cardboard boxes, furniture covered in yellowed sheets. Cobwebs trembled in the corners like they were listening. Julia moved slowly, scanning the labels her grandmother had once taped in tidy handwriting. Winter coats, holiday decor, letters. Then she saw it. A plastic tub, sealed with heavy black tape, no label, tucked behind a rocking horse and an old garment rack like it had been hidden, not stored. She dragged it forward, the floor creaking as it shifted. The tape tore reluctantly. She lifted the lid. Inside, baby clothes. Neatly folded, tiny onesies with delicate embroidery. A soft pink blanket. A wooden rattle shaped like a rabbit. Julia's breath caught when she saw the small hospital bracelet near the bottom, plastic, yellowed, barely holding together. It was wrapped in tissue paper like something sacred. She unfolded it gently. M. Everly, female DOB, 3/27. Her fingers trembled. There was no year, but the bracelet looked real, not a toy, not a keepsake for a doll. Something worn, used. She turned her phone light on and examined the bottom of the bin. A photo album, smaller than the others, leather-bound, no writing on the cover. She flipped it open. First page, the same baby, Mary Beth, sleeping, yawning, one photo after another, being held by hands Julia didn't recognize, always indoors, always alone. The background was often the same, the guest room upstairs, the floral wallpaper from the 1970s still partially visible in the corners. On the third page, something different, a shot of the nursery. The room was filled with toys Julia didn't remember ever seeing. A mobile shaped like stars and moons, a crib with initials carved into the frame, M.E. She closed the album slowly. This wasn't imagination. It wasn't a story or a symbolic memory. Someone had prepared for this child, dressed her, named her, held her. So why wasn't she in the family tree? Why wasn't she spoken of? Julia descended the attic ladder slowly, the album pressed to her chest. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. She moved to the guest room and opened the closet. Inside, behind a row of outdated coats, was the bassinet, folded neatly, just like it had been years ago. She pulled it forward and set it up in the center of the room. The frame clicked into place with surprising ease. the way things sometimes do when they've been waiting. She stared at it for a long time, then placed the bracelet inside. That night, as the house creaked and settled around her, Julia heard something above. A soft knock. 3 gentle taps, coming from the attic. She didn't move, didn't speak. She only listened. Julia didn't go up right away. She sat in bed for nearly 20 minutes, the knock still echoing in her head like a ripple moving across still water. 3 soft taps, too deliberate to be nothing, too faint to be threatening. But they were real. She had felt them more than she'd heard them, in the soles of her feet, in her ribs. Something had touched the bones of the house, and the house had whispered back. She finally moved, quietly slipping on her slippers and robe, not bothering with the light. The hallway was dim, lit only by moonlight through the lace curtains. The attic door still hung open. The pull string dangled like a finger pointing down. She climbed. The air in the attic felt warmer this time. Still dusty, still dry, but heavy now, like it had been breathed by someone else. The bulb flickered again but stayed on. Julia scanned the space. Nothing had moved, nothing visible anyway. But the mirror had fogged. There was a full-length mirror leaning against the wall between 2 stacks of trunks. Its surface was blurred, just slightly, like breath had passed over it. Julia stepped toward it slowly. The mirror itself was odd, older than the rest of the furniture, the kind with silver backing that ages into clouded corners. But now it showed her reflection clear, and something else. Behind her, in the glass, a figure moved. She spun. Nothing there. The attic was still. But when she turned back to the mirror, something had shifted. The edge of the frame, wooden, carved with ivy leaves, was cracked along the top. She leaned in, tracing her finger along the damage, and felt it give slightly. Loose. She pulled. The top corner of the frame lifted, revealing a folded piece of paper tucked behind the glass. Yellowed, thin, fragile. She opened it carefully. It was a letter. Her grandmother's handwriting. To whoever finds this, there was a baby. My baby. But not for long. She was born quiet, never cried, never moved unless I looked away. Your grandfather didn't believe me, said I needed rest. I kept her in the nursery, but the room never stayed warm. The clock would stop at 3:27 every night. She smiled once, just once, and then she was gone. We buried what was left, but the house remembers. Julia felt her knees go weak. She sat down, the letter trembling in her hand. There had been a baby. Mary Beth was real. Not a figment, not a family ghost story. A real child. But something wasn't right. Born quiet, never cried, moved only when unseen. What did that mean? And what had they buried? The next day, Julia searched every drawer, every cabinet, looking for more. She found nothing, until she stood in her grandparents' bedroom and saw the wall behind the dresser. There was a pale square near the floor. The wallpaper didn't match. Faded, slightly lifted at the corners. She peeled it back. A small hatch. It looked like a vent at first, but the edges were framed. She pulled gently. It opened. Inside, nestled in dust and old linens, was another photo. This time, not of the baby, but of her grandmother, holding something wrapped in a blanket. Her face was distant, eyes red, like she'd been crying, and beside her was a man Julia didn't recognize. The back of the photo was blank. She replaced it and shut the hatch. Her breath felt shallow now, like the house had stolen a little of it for itself. Later that night, at exactly 3:27, the power flickered. The hallway clock stopped. Julia stood in the guest room, watching its hands freeze. Downstairs, a door creaked. She didn't move, didn't speak, just listened again. The next morning was gray. Sky stretched thin behind the trees outside the window. Julia sat at the kitchen table, still in her robe, the letter folded neatly beside a cold cup of tea. She hadn't slept. Not really. Just lay there with the sound of that creaking door replaying in her head. The same way her grandmother's words replayed, "We buried what was left." That sentence was what finally led her outside. The garden was quiet. It always had been her grandmother's pride. A narrow strip along the side of the house, bordered by ivy and low stones, where roses and foxglove once bloomed in perfect rows. But now, it was overgrown, untended, nature reclaiming what had been neatly ordered. Julia walked along the stone wall, brushing past dry stalks, her fingers grazing the chipped surface. Halfway down, her eyes caught something strange, a patch of earth, slightly sunken. Not obvious, but different. She knelt, brushed away leaves and roots. Beneath them, a flat stone, smaller than the others, carved by hand, not professional, not even deep. Just a name, faint but clear in the right light. Mary Beth. No date, just a name. She sat back slowly, her heart dull and heavy. The soil here had been touched, carefully, quietly. Not the kind of grave meant to be found, but not one meant to be forgotten either. It was her grandmother's hand, no question. She remembered something now. A day long ago, maybe 6 or 7 years old, digging for worms with a spoon while her grandmother trimmed the hedges. She remembered being told not to touch that corner of the garden, that it was resting ground. She had thought it meant for plants. She hadn't asked again. That night, Julia returned to the guest room. The bassinet still sat open, the bracelet still inside. She didn't move it. She didn't speak, just sat on the bed and listened to the house settle. At 3:27 a.m., the hallway light flickered once. Then the air changed. Not colder, but fuller. Like someone had entered without sound. She didn't move. A creak at the bedroom door. She turned slowly. The room was empty, but the bracelet was gone. The next morning, she found it by the garden wall, placed gently on top of the soil. The charm glinted in the sun. A small rose petal, newly fallen, lay beside it. Julia didn't cry. She just smiled, soft and sad, and whispered, "I see you." The house felt lighter after that. Not cheerful, not filled with noise or color, but lighter, as if it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for decades. Julia didn't speak of Mary Beth right away. Not to her mother, not to the realtor, not to anyone. Some truths weren't meant to be announced like headlines. Some were quiet things, personal, patient, meant to be carried like a locket against the chest. She returned to the attic once more, not to search, but to sit. The dusty air no longer felt oppressive. It felt familiar, known. The mirror reflected only her now. No figures behind her, no flickers. Just a girl, older than she had felt the day before, sitting cross-legged in a place full of memory. Before she left the house for the last time, she returned to the garden. She smoothed the soil over the stone, careful not to disturb the bracelet she'd left there. Then, she placed a small paper rose above it, folded from the same stationery her grandmother had once used for letters. A quiet offering. Later, when she spoke to her mother, she didn't mention the mirror, the letter, or the midnight creaks, just the name. "Do you remember Mary Beth?" Her mother hesitated, then simply nodded. "We weren't allowed to talk about her," she said. Julia didn't press. There was no need. Some silences don't need to be broken to be heard. Mary Beth had been part of the family all along, just hidden in the folds, like a pressed flower in an old book, forgotten by design, remembered by instinct, and now, finally, seen. Sometimes a mystery doesn't want to be solved. It just wants to be acknowledged.